Monogeneans are a group of really cool and interesting looking parasitic worms, and I feel like a lot of people don't know about them. They primarily infect fish and amphibians, although a couple species have been found in things like turtles, and there's one species that infects mammals. And one of their more striking features is their posterior end is these really crazy shapes. These are actually adhesive attachment organs that make up a structure called the opisthopter. And they use these structures to latch on to their host, usually the gills of fish. There are two major groups of monogeneans, the mono and polyopisthocatlia. They're basically separated by how many suction cups do they have on their opisthopter. The monos have one major attachment organ, while the polys have a bunch of little suction cups they use to latch onto their host. And earlier this year, a new species of monogenean was discovered. This new worm species is called Nazi gulper, and you can see there's one major suction cup at the bottom, so that would put this in the monoepisthocatlia. Now, believe it or not, even though we can get some pretty good images like this of parasitic worms, it's actually still a pretty common practice to sketch out new species when you discover them. In fact, a lot of papers, when they describe a new species of parasitic worm, their only figures are the sketches rather than images of the worm themselves. But that's an aside. Where did they discover this cool new worm? Well, this worm was found in the gills of a gulper shark. Summer is pretty much here, so I've been in the mood for highlighting some really cool shark parasites. And while sharks do get their fair share of monogeneans, there's plenty of other cool parasites that they get, and I'm really excited to talk about them. These are velvet-bellied lantern sharks. They're some of the smallest shark species in the world, and they can be found around Norway. They're sometimes known as glowing sharks because they can quite literally glow in the dark, but that's not the only amazing thing about them. They are also hosts to a really peculiar parasite. This parasite is a barnacle called anolosma, and it was actually first described by Charles Darwin in the 1850s. And back then, he suspected that it was a type of parasite, but he didn't know of what. But then in 2014, we found this barnacle attached and feeding off of its host, the velvet-bellied lantern shark. The barnacle burrows into the skin of the shark where they absorb nutrients from the tissues. But the cool thing about this parasite is that it's in a transitional phase to becoming fully parasitic, while still maintaining some of those non-parasitic features. Now, over on the right, we have a non-parasitic barnacle where they have a stalk called a peduncle, which is where they situate themselves into where they're sitting, and they have these grasping appendages called cirri. And these cirri will grab particles from the water column, bringing it to the barnacle's stomach. Now, when we look at the parasitic anolosma, you can see that there are some cirri there, but they're greatly reduced, and they're not really good for grasping anything from the water column. Specimens also have stomachs, but there's never anything in them. And their peduncle has developed these tendril-like appendages that are called rootlets. And these rootlets are actually what burrow into the shark's skin and absorb nutrients from the tissues. Now, this is really cool because in the grand scheme of evolutionary biology and geologic history, transitional forms between something not parasitic to a parasite don't last very long. It's much more common to find stuff that are either fully parasitic or free-living. Finding these in-between forms is extremely rare, which makes this barnacle a very cool animal. Here we have a spotted estuary roughhound shark. They are very pretty sharks that can be found off the coast of New Zealand, and they have an equally pretty tapeworm. Or at least I think they're pretty. This is Calleobothrium. And no, they're not actually discolored. This is just a stained dye that we like to give parasites that make them easier to see under a microscope. And a microscope is definitely needed for this tapeworm because they are extremely small. They only average about 4 millimeters in length, with some individuals being smaller than a grain of rice. Now, there are multiple species of smoothhound shark, and it was once thought that they each had their own specific species of tapeworm parasite. But this species of Calleobothrium changed all that, since it was found in the intestines of a shark that had other species of Calleobothrium in it, meaning that species within this genus of tapeworm may not be as host-specific as we originally thought. And every once in a while, they can be found in the intestine of a shark with another species of tapeworm, and they get along just fine. This is the scolex of a tapeworm in the genus Clistobothrium. This particular species is a parasite of great white sharks. But Clistobothrium is a pretty large genus of tapeworms, and they can get pretty diverse. Depending on the species, there is a vast array of different types of scolices. Everything from these weird suction cup suckers to this crumpled up mess. I don't know what's going on with that one. The complete life cycle of Clistobothrium tapeworms is still not that well understood. We know the definitive hosts are sharks because that's where the adult tapeworms infect and lay their eggs. But the intermediate hosts can be a wide variety of different things. Larvae of Clistobothrium have been found in crabs, squid, and pinnipeds like seals and sea lions. But relatively recently, another player came into the mix. Because back in 2021, an oarfish washed up on a beach in Japan. The oarfish was taken in for necropsies, and they found something pretty incredible. The oarfish is part of the Clistobothrium life cycle. Larvae Clistobothrium have been found in this oarfish, and since they're larvae, that means that these oarfish are getting predated on by sharks. And this is just one of the many reasons why I love parasitology. You could be studying one particular type of animal and then make a discovery about another species unrelated to your current research. Discovering this worm in this fish led to a discovery about shark diets. And I think that is amazing. Whale sharks are probably up there with the top 10 most beautiful animal on this planet. Not only are they the largest shark in the ocean and therefore the largest fish, but their coloration kind of has this cosmic feel to it, like their skin is just a starry night. But no matter how big and no matter how stunning you are, you're getting parasites. And if you're large, you're getting a bunch of them. All these brown patches on the shark's face, and they actually appear at the front of their fins as well, are a bunch of little microscopic parasitic copepods called Pandarus. Now before you get too grossed out, just know that Pandarus is actually kind of cute. The biggest challenge for Pandarus is actually staying attached to the shark while it's swimming, and so they have a series of adhesive discs and hooks that help them stay attached to the skin. Their carapace is also fringed shape, which kind of makes them biological suction cups able to stay attached to the shark. Now, while the skin is somewhat damaged by these copepods attaching to it, they don't really appear to be too much trouble for the shark at all. They don't seem to care that the copepods are on their face, and in some cases, the copepods are actually eating bacteria off of the shark, so they might actually be beneficial. Which is why I think Pandarus might be more like barnacles, maybe their status as a parasite is somewhat of a gray area.